When I reported my CEO brother, my parents said, "He's our retirement plan." I sat there, my hands clasped so tight my knuckles were white, as the HR director looked at me with an unreadable expression. Accusing the CEO of sexual harassment? That's already a nightmare. But when that CEO is your own brother, and your parents choose his money over your safety, that's when your whole world doesn't just shatter, it ignites. "You understand this is a serious allegation, right?" she asked, her voice flat. "Sexual harassment against the CEO is not something we take lightly." I nodded, my throat tight. "I understand," I managed, "but it happened multiple times. My brother, Damon, cornered me in the supply closet last month. Then again, in the parking garage just last week. He keeps saying things about my body, touching my shoulders when no one's looking, texting me late at night about spending quality time together." She scribbled on her notepad, never meeting my eyes. "And you're certain you want to proceed? You understand false accusations could result in your termination." My face burned. "I'm not making it up. I have the text messages. I can show you right now." She raised a hand. "Not necessary at this moment. I'll discuss this with the executive board. In the meantime, keep this confidential." I walked out of her office feeling physically sick, but also a sliver of relief. I'd finally spoken up after months of Damon's creeping behavior. That evening, my phone rang. "Mom." I almost didn't answer because I knew what was coming. But I did. Her voice cut through me, sharp and accusatory before I could even say hello. "What did you do? What are you talking about?" I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer. "Damon called us. He's very upset. He said you went to HR with some ridiculous story about him harassing you." Her voice dripped with disbelief. "How could you do this to your own brother?" I took a shaky breath. "It's not ridiculous, Mom. It's the truth. He's been harassing me for months. The texts, the comments about my appearance, cornering me when I'm alone. It's not okay just because he's my brother." She made a sound, half laugh, half scoff. "Oh, please. Damon would never do something like that. He's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Beautiful women throw themselves at him constantly. Why would he bother harassing his little sister?" A hot burn started behind my eyes. "Because he can, Mom. Because he knows I work for him, and he thinks that gives him power over me. Mom, he grabbed my waist last week and whispered something disgusting in my ear when we were alone in the elevator." Her energy shifted through the phone, palpable even across the distance. Her voice went cold, calculating. "Listen to me very carefully. Your father and I have worked our entire lives with very little to show for it. We raised you and Damon in a tiny apartment, worked multiple jobs, sacrificed everything so you could both have opportunities we never had. Damon took those opportunities and built something extraordinary. Do you understand what that means for us? I don't care what it means for you." I shouted, my voice cracking. "He's sexually harassing me at work. That's illegal. Your father and I are depending on Damon," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "He bought us our house. He pays for our health insurance. He's promised to support us when we retire in 3 years. He's our retirement plan. You are not going to destroy that because you're too sensitive to handle some brotherly teasing." "This isn't teasing," I practically screamed. "This is harassment. It's wrong, and it's illegal, and I'm not going to just accept it because you need his money." A long, suffocating silence. Then, my father's voice. He must have taken the phone. His tone was even more chilling than hers. "You need to think very carefully about what you're doing here. If you pursue this complaint and it damages Damien's reputation or his position at the company, you will be cut off from this family completely. Do you understand me? We will not support you financially or emotionally. You will be on your own. And frankly, you should be grateful Damon even gave you a job at his company in the first place. You barely graduated college and you have no real skills." I hung up without a word, dropping to my kitchen floor. My cat nudged my hand as I cried, the betrayal of physical ache. I'd known they favored Damon, the golden child, but I never realized they'd literally sold their loyalty to him, the very man who was harassing me. The next morning, I was called into a meeting with HR and 2 strangers. Outside counsel, they introduced themselves. 3 hours of excruciating detail. Every incident. Every word. Where his hands had been. Who might have witnessed it. I showed them the texts, the late-night messages, the comments about my appearance, the suggestions for drinks. Victoria Sterling, one of the lawyers, studied them. These are certainly inappropriate, she said slowly. But they're not explicitly sexual. Your brother could argue he was just trying to maintain a familiar relationship with his sister. My face flushed with anger. He's not trying to be familiar. He's trying to make me uncomfortable. He knows I can't avoid him because he's the CEO, and I need this job. The older lawyer, silver-haired, leaned forward. Has your brother ever explicitly propositioned you for sexual activity? Has he touched you in a way that would be considered sexual assault? I thought about the hand on my waist, the fingers lingering on my shoulder, the way he'd pressed close in the elevator. It felt violating. But was it assault? I don't know, I admitted, defeated. He touches me in ways that make me uncomfortable. He stands too close. He makes comments about my body. But he hasn't explicitly propositioned me. The lawyers exchanged glances. We'll continue our investigation, Victoria said. In the meantime, we're going to recommend you be transferred to a different department where you won't have regular contact with the CEO. Would that be acceptable? I wanted to scream. No! I wanted him held accountable, not me punished. But rent was due, student loans, car payments. I needed this job. So, I nodded, knowing it wasn't fine at all. The transfer happened fast. Executive operations to a dismal basement cubicle in accounting, flickering lights, no windows. My new boss, Patricia, made it clear I was an unwanted problem. My parents called every single day for a week, a tag team of psychological warfare. Mom with the guilt trips, you're destroying the family. If word gets out, it could ruin his career. Is that what you want? They're not innocent comments. I insisted, my voice getting weaker with each call. You always were the dramatic one, she'd sigh. Remember when you were 12 and accused your teacher? Turns out you were just failing. Doubts started to creep in. Had I always exaggerated? Was Damon just being friendly? Dad's approach was all about money. Do you want your mother and me to be homeless in our 60s? Is that the kind of daughter you want to be? He painted their financial situation in brutal detail, all dependent on Damon. Your brother has been nothing but good to you. He got you that job when no one else would hire you. And this is how you repay him? The investigation dragged on. More interviews. They'd talked to other women. Damon Kingston? He barely notices any of us unless we're presenting quarterly reports, one woman had laughed. The investigators seemed frustrated. We can't substantiate a pattern of harassment, Victoria told me. The texts are inappropriate, but could be interpreted as a brother trying to maintain a relationship. Without witnesses to corroborate the physical touching, we have insufficient evidence to proceed with disciplinary action. I felt like I was drowning. So, nothing happens to him? Victoria offered a sympathetic look that somehow made it worse. We'll recommend mandatory harassment training for all executives, and we've transferred you. Those are significant steps. But without more concrete evidence, we can't justify terminating a CEO based on one employee's allegations. Especially because that employee is family. It creates credibility issues. That night, Damon called me directly. His voice was smooth, controlled, chillingly familiar. I heard the investigation concluded. I'm disappointed in you, little sister. I've only ever tried to help you, and you repaid me by trying to destroy my reputation. I tried to speak, but he cut me off. Mom and Dad are devastated. Mom's blood pressure is through the roof. Dad's barely sleeping. They're terrified they're going to lose everything because you couldn't handle a few friendly text messages. His voice hardened. I'm willing to let this go, for the sake of family harmony. But you need to understand something. You work for my company. You exist in my world. If you ever try something like this again, I will make sure you never work in this industry again. Do you understand? I hung up, unable to answer. I immediately started looking for new jobs. But every application needed references. And my current employer was controlled by my brother. I was trapped. My parents stopped calling after the investigation. Instead, I was simply erased. No calls, no texts, no emails. My messages went unanswered. One Saturday, I drove to their house. My mother was in the garden. She looked up, her face carefully blank. Mom, I said, hating how my voice cracked. Can we talk? We have nothing to discuss, she said, turning back to her roses. You made your choice when you tried to destroy your brother. Now we're making ours. But I'm your daughter, I whispered. He's our retirement plan, she said flatly, clipping a dead bloom. You are always going to be on your own eventually. We invested everything in Damien because he was worth investing in. You've never given us anything but problems and expenses. Now, please leave. Your father doesn't want you here. I went back to my basement cubicle, to the flickering lights, and tried to figure out what to do. Patricia, my boss, made my life a living hell. She'd clearly been told I was a problem employee. Other coworkers avoided me, probably warned to keep their distance. I ate lunch alone in my car. Then, 3 months later, an email popped up in my spam folder. The subject line, "You're not the only one." I almost deleted it. But something made me open it. It was from a woman named Simone Lightet. She'd worked at Damon's previous company and had seen my name in a business article. I experienced similar harassment from Damien 5 years ago, she wrote. Same tactics. Inappropriate texts, standing too close, comments. I reported it to HR, but his father was on the board. The complaint disappeared, and I was pressured to resign. I've lived with the guilt ever since. If you're willing to pursue legal action, I'd testify. I read that email 10 times, my hands shaking. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. There was a pattern. Damon had done this before. He'd gotten away with it because of family connections. I wrote back immediately. Simone called me that same evening. We talked for over 2 hours. She described incidents eerily similar to mine, the elevator, the late-night texts, the lingering touch. She'd been young, scared, financially dependent. When HR dismissed her complaint, she'd felt she had no choice but to leave quietly. I should have fought harder, she said, her voice thick with regret. But I was 23 and terrified. His family made it clear they would destroy me. I'm 30 now, established. He can't hurt me anymore, and I can't let him keep doing this to other women. We started building a case. Simone connected me with Rajesh Patel, an employment attorney who specialized in sexual harassment. He listened, reviewed the evidence. He agreed to take the case on contingency. This is going to be difficult, he warned. Your brother is wealthy and powerful. He'll hire the best defense attorneys. And the family dynamics complicate everything. Are you prepared for what this will mean for your relationships? I thought of my mother's cold dismissal, my father's threats, their choice to prioritize Damon's money over my well-being. I have no family relationships left to complicate, I told him. They already made their choice. Rajesh filed the lawsuit on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, my entire family was in crisis mode. My phone exploded. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even my grandmother called. How dare you air family business in public, my Aunt Delilah screamed into my voicemail. Damon has supported half this family financially. Do you know how many people will suffer if you ruin him? My parents retained their own lawyer, concerned about their financial arrangement with Damon. They released a public statement, saying they stood fully behind their son, and the allegations were false and motivated by jealousy. My mother even gave an interview to a local news outlet, describing me as a troubled young woman who'd always struggled with mental health issues and had a history of making false accusations for attention. Watching her on camera, makeup perfect, voice dripping with false concern, was somehow worse than the direct rejection. The company's legal team filed a motion to dismiss almost immediately, arguing I'd failed to exhaust internal remedies. But Rajesh had anticipated that. He documented every step of the internal complaint process, every inadequacy of their investigation, every structural reason why their remedies were insufficient when the harasser was the CEO. The judge denied the motion. Discovery began. That's when things got truly ugly. Damon's attorney subpoenaed everything, my medical records, therapy notes, employment history, social media accounts back to high school. They were looking for anything to paint me as unstable. They deposed my former roommates, college professors, ex-boyfriend. Every person who'd ever seen me at less than my best was questioned about my mental state and credibility. Meanwhile, Rajesh built our case. He found 2 more women. Kesha Wu, a junior associate at a law firm that did work for Damon's company. He'd cornered her at an event, made explicit comments. When she tried to distance herself, he'd had her firm removed from the company's approved vendor list. Irina Volkov, an executive assistant, quit after Damon grabbed her during a late-night work session. She'd signed an NDA, but Rajesh argued NDAs couldn't cover up illegal behavior. The depositions were brutal. Damon's lead attorney, Jeffrey Blackwell, was a shark. He spent 6 hours questioning me about every text, every elevator ride. He brought up every mistake I'd made at work, every negative performance review. Isn't it true you were on a performance improvement plan before you filed this complaint? Isn't it true your supervisor had documented concerns? Isn't it true you were facing possible termination and filed this complaint as a preemptive strike? No, I said, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. I filed this complaint because my brother sexually harassed me and the company failed to protect me. He smiled, a predator's grin. Your brother? The man who gave you a job when no one else would hire you. The man who'd supported your parents financially for years. And now you're trying to destroy him because he sent you a few friendly text messages that you've chosen to interpret as harassment? That's not what happened, I insisted. But he'd already moved on. Damon's deposition was a masterclass in controlled performance. He sat calmly in his expensive suit, answering with practiced precision. He admitted sending the texts, but spun them as a brother trying to connect with a distant sister. He denied touching me inappropriately, suggesting I'd misinterpreted innocent familial gestures. Confronted with Simone's testimony, he looked genuinely confused. I barely remember Simone. If she felt uncomfortable, it was likely because I had to deliver critical feedback about her poor performance. My parents sat in the gallery, a blatant show of support. Mom dabbed at her eyes when Damon spoke of his love for family and his devastation that I'd turned on him. Dad sat stone-faced, radiating disapproval in my direction. They never acknowledged me. The case dragged on for over a year. New legal bills, motions, attempts by the defense to bury us. I'd moved into a cheaper apartment, picked up a second job waiting tables. Staying at Damon's company was impossible. Even though I knew leaving would be used against me. Rajesh worked tirelessly. He brought in expert witnesses, psychologists explaining grooming behavior, statisticians showing patterns across multiple victims. The defense brought their own experts. Behavior didn't meet legal standards, family dynamics complicate consent, she failed to communicate discomfort. Both sides prepared for a trial that would last weeks and cost hundreds of thousands. Then, something unexpected happened. A journalist, Andrea Curry, published a deep investigation into Damon's company culture. She'd interviewed dozens of employees, current and former, on background. A pattern emerged. Women described boundary violations, too afraid to report. The HR director who took my initial complaint? Fired shortly after. Replaced by someone with close ties to Damon. The independent investigators? Frequently retained by the company, creating a financial incentive to protect their client. Andrea's article went viral. My lawsuit wasn't just a family dispute, it was part of a larger story about powerful men evading accountability. Other victims came forward. The board, facing immense pressure, announced an independent investigation. Damon was placed on administrative leave. My parents, of course, doubled down. They gave interviews defending Damon, framing the allegations as a coordinated attack. My mother appeared on a local morning show, perfectly coiffed and sympathetic. He's always been the target of jealousy, she said, her voice breaking on cue. He came from nothing and built an empire. Now people want to tear him down. It's heartbreaking as a mother. The independent investigation took 3 months. They interviewed 50 employees, reviewed thousands of documents. The findings were damning. A pattern of harassment spanning Damon's entire tenure. Complaints systematically buried. Women paid settlements with NDAs. The report concluded Damon created a hostile work environment. The board asked for his resignation. He refused, forcing them to terminate him for cause. No golden parachute. Just a letter stating his employment ended due to violations of the company's code of conduct. The news made national headlines. My phone buzzed constantly with reporters, advocacy groups, other lawyers. I ignored most of them, focused on just getting through each day. My parents' financial situation imploded overnight. Without Damon's income, they couldn't afford their mortgage. The house went up for sale within weeks. Their retirement plans vanished. Dad took a job as a night security guard, Mom returned to being a receptionist. Their social circle evaporated. I watched their downfall through social media and news, a complicated mix of vindication and sadness. They had chosen Damon's money over me. Now, they had neither. Damon spiraled. He defined himself by his CEO role. Losing it left him unmoored. He started drinking, posting unhinged rants about betrayal. His wife filed for divorce. Other companies asked him to resign from their boards. His professional reputation was destroyed. Our lawsuit settled 6 weeks after Damon's termination. The company agreed to pay me and the other plaintiffs a substantial, confidential sum. More importantly, they implemented comprehensive policy changes, independent oversight of complaints, mandatory training, transparency. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Simone, Kesha, Arena, and I stayed in touch. We'd been through something terrible and come out changed, but surviving. We started a support group for other women dealing with workplace harassment, sharing resources, and just listening. Rajesh connected us with advocacy organizations. We testified before legislative committees about stronger protections, better enforcement. My parents never apologized. Instead, they blamed me for their ruin, for Damon's downfall, for the destruction of our family. They gave interviews painting themselves as the real victims. My mother wrote a blog post picked up by conservative media, describing me as an example of victimhood culture destroying successful men. She talked about their sacrifices, only to have me throw it back in their faces by refusing to accept that boys will be boys and brothers will sometimes make their sisters uncomfortable. I stopped reading. Their version of events wasn't reality. What I could control was my own healing. I found a new job at a nonprofit focused on workplace rights, using my experience to help others. My pain became productive, trauma into advocacy. I started therapy. Dr. Elise Beaumont specialized in family estrangement and betrayal trauma. The work was hard, unpacking years of conditioning, where I'd been taught my needs mattered less than Damon's success. Dr. Beaumont helped me understand that my parents' choice wasn't a reflection of my worth, but of their values. They chose money and status over integrity and love. That was their failure, not mine. 2 years after the settlement, I ran into my mother at a grocery store. She looked older, tired, wearing discount clothes. We made eye contact across the produce section. For a moment, I thought she might approach. Instead, she turned away and disappeared down another aisle. The rejection still stung, but less than it once had. I built a life without them, surrounded by people who valued honesty and courage over money and appearances. 3 years out, Damon's attempts at a comeback repeatedly failed. He tried consulting, motivational speaking, even a memoir, all were disasters. The last I heard, he was a middle manager in another state. His name no longer carried any weight. My parents struggled financially, living in a small apartment. They never reached out to reconcile. In their minds, I remained the daughter who destroyed their golden child and ruined their retirement. The fact that their golden child had destroyed himself through his own actions didn't factor into their calculations. I let them go, mourning the parents I wished I had while accepting the ones I'd actually gotten. 5 years after filing the lawsuit, I spoke at a conference on workplace harassment. The audience was full of HR professionals, lawyers, activists, survivors. I told my story, not sparing the hard parts about family betrayal and institutional failure. When I finished, a young woman approached me, crying. She was dealing with harassment at her own family's business. Her parents had told her the same thing mine had, family legacy over her discomfort. Hearing my story had given her courage. I gave her Rajesh's contact and the names of other attorneys. I told her she wasn't alone, that fighting back was hard but possible, that choosing herself over family loyalty wasn't selfish, but necessary. She hugged me tightly, and I felt the purpose that had emerged from all that pain. 10 years later, I built a career advocating for survivors and changing workplace policies. My parents eventually passed away, bitter and isolated. Damon stayed on his downward trajectory, his life a cautionary tale. The company where it all began became a model for harassment prevention, frequently cited in case studies. And I found peace. Not because justice was perfect or complete, but because I had refused to accept that anyone's career or comfort mattered more than basic human dignity and respect.